Hello and welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to the next part of the post-apocalyptic Hobby Boss AN-2 Colt. What we're going to do in this episode is do the engines and all the greeblies, so that's all the sort of funky extra bits and pieces. And this is the back of the resin Napier Sabre engine set, the Brassin set from Eduard. And because the back's going to be all exposed, I thought that's going to need some detailing, so just using some plastic strip. It was just obviously glued on with super glue because it is resin, and it goes some way to busying up the area. I had thought of trying to scratch build some cowlings, but no, that was just too A-level, so it's just going to be a little bit of detail here, followed by some Albion Alloys tubing to help support the engine. And there we go, pretty much done. You can see the hole there. That's for a brass rod that's going to go through and secure into the back of the engine. And also, it's going to be part of the engine mounting system, so it's going to be very, very sturdy. But here is some of the other tubing. There's going to be some of the other supports. And once I'd bent the first one, I'll just use that as a pattern for all the others. And what we'll do is we'll just do a quick test fit. So I've already drilled some holes in the wing and in the back of the firewall, and this whole model really has been test first before we cut anything, so you're going to be able to see the actual general arrangement there. That will end up being quite sturdy in the end. So I've made up the engine mount itself. That's quite a few parts. You can see a little bit of warpage there from the resin, but don't worry, you're not going to notice that. The engine will just bow that out. So that had a coat of primer, and I'm going to do a rusty steel effect. So over a black base coat, I sprayed some alclad steel. Then had a layer of hairspray, and then this is a mixed sort of dark blue-grey colour. So a bit of extra dark sea grey, bit of black in there, a little bit of blue. And this was heavily chipped. And what we're doing here is, this is kind of laying the base for the rusty steel. It's all about layers, and it's all about getting the right tones and patina. So the hairspray will just chip away the top layer of paint, and it'll leave it in all the recesses and things like that. We'll do another coat, and this time using red brown with a little bit of yellow for the rusty tones. And you can see just those few layers how authentic that looks. That resin is quite fragile, so I'm being very gentle. And the paint's very thin, which is going to help. Just using the cotton bud to soak up some of the excess water. Now on the back. So you can see how when it chips, it's kind of left in all the nooks and crannies and recesses, which is where the rust would probably accumulate as well. And even just that, we get a nice authentic rusty steel looking, but we can go a little bit further. So this is an orange tone made from, it was Tamiya, just yellow and red, just mixed up. And that was sprayed in, again, layer of hairspray, and then that was sprayed in over the nooks and crannies and the high spots. And then we'll do the hairspray chipping technique. We'll just remove the excess, it'll become chipped, and it'll remove it off the high spots, leaving it in the recesses as well. You can see even just that is looking really quite good. And this is just a bit of hairspray and a few different Tamiya tones over the top of the base coat. So concentrated on this front part, on some of the hinges, some of the brackets, just where the bolts and screws are going to go through, because I thought, yeah, that's likely where the rust is probably going to accumulate the worst. And there's the front side. Look at all that detail. Now for some washes. So this is Trax Wash from Ammo, which is a really nice sort of dark orangey brown rusty tone, and it's neat straight from the bottle here, and I'm just applying it as a wash and then in vertical streaks, remembering that the engine's going to hang upside down. And then what we'll do is we'll just apply the product, and then we'll wait not too long, and then we'll come in with a moist brush and we'll do some blending. That's the right way up. Once that's done, going to take a sort of a dark brown, sort of a dark, very dark rusty tone, and we'll do some splattering. Again, it's all adding to the patina and the layers. And that's the engine mounts done. Onto the engine itself. You can see how many parts are here. That's on the reduction gearbox. Or accessories gearbox, I should say. And it was a really, really involved build, actually, the engine. Loads of parts. But as you see, you just take your time, pay attention to the instructions, and you'll end up with a really highly detailed lump of resin. Right, following the instructions, there's quite a bit of wiring and pipage that needs adding from scratch. I did use some cotton covered wire for sort of braided hose. I don't know whether these were supposed to be braided or not, but I thought it would look quite good and it would take the paint nicely. And you can see some of the other wiring there just from lead wire. Lead wire is really good for this because it's just so easy to bend to shape. And then we're just adding these resin hoses at the front. I'm assuming something to do with the coolant system. Again, I think it looks like there's some kind of lagging on there or something. Definite texture. Looks really nice. And you see how tedious this would be to do 2 engines. But I persevered. And actually, it wasn't too bad because rather than do them both at the same time, I did one, so then when I did the second one, I could actually learn. Right. Everything gets a nice coat of primer. Mr. Surfacer 1200. And then initially a base coat of black. It's just got a few drops of brown in there. You can't really tell on camera just looking at this, but yeah, there's a few drops of brown in there just to give a sort of oily tone to it. And it's important when spraying this to get right in there, right in the nooks and crannies. It is so detailed that It is actually quite difficult to get sort of hold of everything. Starting to look the part now. Okay, just spraying on a layer of varnish here because I used MRP paints. They're quite shiny. I wanted MRP paints because they are lacquer based, so they're sort of harder wearing. And then back in with the Trax wash again. So the matte varnish means that it's going to soak up this this wash. And it may look a bit too brown and a bit too rusty, but it will dry back and it is a lot more subtle. Just does take an awful long time to dry. And then just the tops were just rubbed with a cotton bud just to get rid of the worst. And then we could do some flickage. So this is just black oil paint with some pigment for a bit of body. And it's just splattered over the top, just to simulate old oil, which isn't that shiny because it does soak up the dirt, and that's what we're trying to recreate there. And get the thing to focus. Come on, there we go. It's starting to look the part now. Right, the exhausts, these had quite a few layers of paint actually. So primer, then black, then a red-brown sort of a mist coat, some sponge chipping with some pink, and then a Trax wash over the top. So this is the radiator part, obviously. This had a matte black base. And then using some of the Ammo of MIG dry brush paint, the silver, it had a thorough going over. And this dry brush paint is absolutely brilliant. It's acrylic and it just works a treat. I'm a massive fan. And here we are on this part of the coolant system that sits out the front. That had the same technique as well. So matte black paint and then a real heavy dry brush. Oops. It's fallen off, but there we go. I think that looks really authentic. Okay, time to start gluing things together. And you see the two little round bits on the bottom of the engine. They glue into the mounts. Now obviously if you're doing this on the Tempest, it's a lot more sturdy. But these are going to be sort of dangling out in the open. So hence I drilled a hole in the back of the engine mount itself. And then right through into the engine. And that'll have a brass rod all the way through. But even with no sort of excess wiring, that looks really good. But it really does need wiring. Now, a lot of it goes into the back of this bulkhead, but what I would try to do is sort of give the impression that a lot of the wires were coming from sort of inside the wing, if you sort of get my drift, and then go all the way down. Obviously, that's the right way up for a Tempest. It's upside down for this Antonov. But yeah, lots of wires, and I tried to use some colours just to sort of brighten things up a bit. So they were glued in place. I then brush painted on the Mr. Surfacer to act as a primer. Then brush painted white paint to act as an undercoat. And then in with the yellow. Kind of like what the Luftwaffe do. Or did, I suppose. Not do, back in the day. And then we'll just leave that to dry, and then we'll get bending. There you can see the brass rod that goes all the way through the engine and the engine mount. And then just using the tweezers, we're just going to do some sort of, I can't imagine what a surgeon would do if he's doing a heart valve replacement or something. It's all very precise, it's all very fiddly, and it's just poking them down. The other end wasn't really glued. You're going to get the effect if you just kind of hide the end of the wires where you can, rather than trying to glue it in specific spots. Actually, it's a neat little trick, that. So I'm just kind of tucking them away, hiding them under bits and bobs and nooks and crannies. So in the front, with the big drill, I've drilled a big hole that will accept this outboard alloys tubing, and this will accept the propeller. So that's the Sea Fury propeller from the Airfix kit, and it even turns. Look at that. Right, this is going to be a tri-motor. I did think I was going to put an F4 Phantom radar in the nose, and I still think that would have looked quite cool, but I preferred actually to go down the tri-motor route. So this is an Aires Pratt & Whitney 2800, and just using various washes there, just to I kind of wanted a really kind of used and abused look, so hence the Trax wash. Really versatile colour, that. The Trax wash on the sort of centre bit where the cylinders are going to mount. They're all painted individually, and they just get glued in. Now there's two different types, one for the front row, one for the back, so make sure you don't get them mixed up. And that's looking really rather busy already. Right, before I even started, I drilled out where the push rods are going to go, just to make it easier, because then you don't really have to be that accurate when you chop them to size. So again, that's 0.5mm, I think, Outboard Alloys brass rod. And there is the finished engine, all wired up, all the exhausts on, ready to go. Now the undercarriage. I thought this is going to be really very heavy, so the undercarriage itself needed beefing up. So using the suspension parts from the Tamiya Humvee kit, the chassis was chopped up, and then I just made this little assembly here. I think I'm right in saying this was the rear, which I wanted the rear because I didn't want any steering mechanism or anything like that in the way. So just following the instructions, we're just going to make up this little bit here. And this in itself is really quite detailed, and it's nice that it's on show, because in the Humvee you're not going to see it. That's the underside, and there's the top, and there's the diff in the middle. So that was primed, then it had a coat of black, then it had a coat of black brown, just as a base. And that is going to get well weathered later on. Modifying the undercarriage, I just chopped the ends off here, and then I just used a couple of spare bits of resin actually, and drilled and pinned and superglued them on. And that's actually what the axle is going to mount through. They had an undercoat in dark brown, and that was shot with some matte varnish and then some hairspray. And then over the top used a bit of yellow-green. So this is Tamiya. Now I thinned it with alcohol because that's going to make it easier to chip. If you use lacquer thinner or, you know, Mr. Hobby thinner, the paint can sort of get a bit hard and be a bit difficult to chip. So I just thinned it with 70% alcohol. These are the V-struts. These are from the kit. They were treated exactly the same. Okay, guess which wash this is? Yep, you got it right. It's the Trax wash. That's going to give a kind of nice, deep, rusty kind of colour to it. And you see it's got that sort of browny tone already. I'm trying not to plaster the whole thing because I do want it to act as a wash and not a heavy filter. And the excess will be cleaned up. Right, moving on onto the ordnance. So this is the scratch-built interior for the Tamiya turret. So I've got some resin 303 machine guns. Chopped them off. I used some brass barrels in there, which I ended up losing, which was a right pain. So I had to use up resin ones. And when packing the model up to take it home, I've already snapped one off. So I will order some more brass barrels and replace them eventually. Right, this little sort of strengthening jobby over the top, I just wanted some of the detail to stand out, so that was picked out in silver. And this is ammo steel, which is just brilliant for brush painting. It really is. I did want to put some effort into this bit because, yeah, it is going to be sort of a perspex dome over the top, and it is right on the very top of the fuselage, so it's going to be very prominent. So I did want to put a bit of effort into this one, to be honest, and it really paid off. So the join is not great, if I'm honest, but then it is a sort of 45-year-old kit. So I just got a strip of lead foil, wrap that round to hide the join, and then just use a few little bits and pieces, a couple of bits of plastic card there that were punched out with a punch and die, and that does a good job of actually disguising that join. Right, onto some of the greebly bits now. This is this bit, some sort of radiator thing that came with the Humvee. So that was painted up and given a wash. This is the ammo for the 40mm grenade launcher, which is going to be on the right hand side. So that was chipped, and then using a bit of rust, sort of rust tone oil paint. That was given a bit of a going over. Didn't have any brass paint, unfortunately, so just mixed a bit of the steel colour with a bit of yellow. And you get that sort of goldy colour. I must get some sort of metallic tones, actually. sort of copper and bronze and whatnot. So that's from the Humvee kit. And this is also from the Humvee kit. This is the sort of tool kit. So he's got a shovel and an axe and bits and bobs. That was painted up, and again I wanted a nice sort of rusty tone. The sort of primer red colour you can see there, that's going to be the fuselage colour. So I just wanted it to sort of blend in, if you like. And then I kind of assumed that the spade and the axe and stuff would get a little bit rusty. And then just to finish off, just using a graphite pencil thing, just gave it a bit of rub just for that metallic sheen. And again, in the areas of where the paint's all chipped off, not just on the axe head and the shovel. Okay, the wheels, these are the Def model resin weighted wheels for the Humvee. So they were painted up, liberally covered in pigments, and then using the number 1 digit, it was rubbed over, and that kind of rubs the pigment away, leaving it in the nooks and crannies and a sort of a dusty finish. This is the aircon unit. This was 3D printed by friend of the channel, Nige. It was primed, painted in MRP white, which is that sort of semi-gloss, and then using the chipping tone from Ammo and a sponge, heavily bashed up, I would say, is how I would describe that. So this sits on the outside by the door on the left. And if you remember from the previous episodes, the internal pipe comes out the back of that into the fuselage. Right, this was a scratch-built satellite dish, just from bits of scrap photo etch, rod, wire, blobs of plastic. That was painted up rusty as well, same as the engine mounts. And then finished off with a Trax wash. And when that was dry, it was given a blast of matte varnish, because if it's rusty, it's going to be matte. And one of the final jobs will be to mount this by the above the right-hand waist gunner's position. Right, we're almost there. Now, I got this skull thing, found it on the internet, 48th scale skulls. So the eye sockets were drilled out, as was the nose, make those a bit deeper, and then given a coat in MRP white for the bone, and then just using all sorts of ammo acrylics and using the wet blending method just to blend in all the tones. Wanted a kind of darker tone towards the head, gradually getting lighter, various sort of browns and reds and that kind of thing going on. Now with the black wash, again this is acrylic paint, so just thin down acrylic paint and just use as a wash that's going to highlight all the detail, all the teeth, and darken the shadows in the eye sockets and the nostrils, that kind of thing. just using a bit of thinner just to clean up the excess. The thing with acrylics is you don't want tide marks. And what I did on the end is I just punched a bit of a disc of plastic card on the top, kind of simulating that there's a big pin running right through it, and that's going to mount on the nose. It's these little details that really lift a model in the end. Yeah, just doing a bit of cleanup. And we're pretty much there, I reckon. I'm fussing now and obsessing. I tend to do that with these little details. The final thing was just giving a dry brush in white, again using the AMOV dry brush paints, which are specially formulated for dry brushing. Funny old thing. And like I say, I do wax lyrical about them, but they are brilliant. And there we go, that's the finished animal skull. And that's the end of part 4. That was the engines and greeblies. So coming up in part 5, we actually put the thing together. So again, using my favourite super glue for the seams. Just a little bit of Mr. Surfacer required around the wing. And the old deluxe stuff around the tail. And there it is, with the wings dry fitted, all ready for paint. So I'll see you on the next one then. Thank you, bye bye.